Doctor, so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us again. Happy New Year. And we are now in the middle of the, I guess it's fair to say we're in the middle of the Omicron wave. And we are hearing now from world leaders at the start of this new year that it's more important than ever. We need to make sure we get our kids vaccinated. But there are too many things that give parents like me questions, and experts like you have unanswered questions about this. Tell us about your concern. With vaccinations, this latest strain, and children, you have described it as an unforgivable sin. Talk to us about this.
Well, first of all, Dana, thanks for having me again. I'm glad to hear that you're well again and that you recovered well, and so it's a nice opportunity also to talk to your audience. Well, first of all, I said, like many other experts, that this vaccination for children, there is absolutely no scientific rationale. This is really, there is no other word to describe this, a complete nonsense. Why is this? Well, first of all, the vaccination is not going to benefit the children, because the children are naturally very well protected against COVID. Again, COVID is an infection of children, like influenza is an infection of children, but it's not a childhood disease. And so there's a big difference between an infection and a disease. And the reason why it is not a disease in children is because the children have a very good innate immune system. That is a type or a part of the immune system that they got as a present at birth, that is present as of the very early days after birth. And that is also the reason why children almost never catch severe disease. Of course, they can get the illness, they can get mild illness, and more than at the beginning of the pandemic, we will most likely see with Omicron that children can also get moderate disease. But what is wrong with being ill for a couple of days? What is wrong with being in your bed for a couple of days? That is not something which is abnormal. What is abnormal is contracting severe disease, when you need to be hospitalized, etc. But these things don't happen with children. Of course, there are always exceptions. Children with genetic deficiencies, for example, or children, unfortunately, some, very few, luckily enough, have underlying diseases. But otherwise, this is not a problem. And when the children get a disease, they recover and they will have then acquired immunity. So that is no longer than the innate immunity, because when the virus breaks through the first line of immune defense, which is this innate immunity, then there is still an alarm bell. And that is the acquired immunity that will then take care of the virus, and they will then get this acquired immunity, this protection, basically for the rest of their life. So there is absolutely no advantage of vaccinating them. On the contrary, and that is the point, because if it just wouldn't be very beneficial, but it wouldn't do any harm, then we could still deal with it, I think. But we vaccinologists and independent experts, we cannot deal with it, because there is really a very serious concern, and that is that this innate immunity, these innate antibodies that the children have to protect against coronavirus and influenza virus. And let me say, these innate antibodies are not going to protect them against all viruses or all diseases. Therefore, in certain cases, we need still the vaccines. But in this particular case of coronavirus, influenza, these innate antibodies do protect. But, and here comes the point, the vaccinal antibodies, namely the antibodies that are induced by the vaccine, they can compete with these innate antibodies. You have to imagine you have the virus, the vaccinal antibodies can bind to the virus, even if they don't neutralize the virus anymore, like with Omicron, for example, antibodies can still bind. And the innate antibodies can also bind, but the mechanism of binding is different. The innate antibodies have lower affinity for the virus, so they can more easily be outcompeted by vaccinal antibodies. And that is the problem, because when these innate antibodies get outcompeted, these innate antibodies play an important role in preventing autoimmune diseases. I am not going to explain the mechanism, but that is very well documented. So you can imagine if you suppress these antibodies, there is a higher risk, a higher likelihood that autoimmune diseases could occur. And basically, as you may know, autoimmune disease is the big horror and the big fear of any vaccinologist. On top, as I was telling you, these innate antibodies not only protect against coronavirus, against all the variants and all other coronaviruses, but also, for example, against influenza virus and probably also against a number of other viruses. So that means if you suppress them, you will also have a higher incidence of these other viral diseases in children. So I'll stop there, but you see that it's not just the fact that there is no beneficial effect for the children, but there is even a serious concern that this could really be very harmful for their health.
This is valuable information. We're talking with Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, who's an expert on human vaccinology. We're talking about his long career. That's kind of a question that a lot of people have that you just addressed in terms of the performance of your innate antibodies and then what is induced by the vaccines, because the question has always been, will the vaccine, will that inducement actually harm your body's own natural response? And the view that I have been really developing and watching all of the discussion about this is that our immune system, and as you said, it's not unnatural for people to deal with, a mild illness if you're in bed for a couple of days. But it seems as though the new trend, at least in science and medicine, if you read the headlines, is that is abnormal and that we should do everything pharmaceutically possible to prevent anyone ever from being sick, even at the expense of the health of their own immune system.
Mm. Yeah, well, then let me tell you that the problem is the innate immune system. The quality of the innate immune system is directly related to the overall health status of somebody. So if you are in good shape, and we know what these parameters are, this has to do with nutrition, this has to do with lifestyle, this has to do with, in general, physical, mental health, etc., etc. And then you will have a good innate immunity. That is the reason why even an 85-year-old man or woman who has no overweight, for example, who is still doing, some little exercise, etc., they can still rely on their innate immunity as well. But, and here comes the point, all the factors that contribute to you being in very good shape, in good health, and hence having very high, good quality of your innate immune system, all these factors that contribute to that cannot be commercialized, right? Cannot be commercialized. And typically, vaccinologists, as soon as you start to vaccinate somebody, you are already playing with the acquired part of the immune system, the acquired immunity. And that is, of course, what vaccinologists do. So, in fact, we are bypassing the innate immunity, right? And there is no attention paid to this. And it's like, okay, we need to vaccinate because otherwise people are going to die, people are going to get ill, etc. No, what can happen is that the innate immune system cannot take away all of the virus, that the virus can, it takes away the majority of the viral load, but still some viruses, some viral particles can still break through that. But then, nature is fantastic. We still have the acquired immunity that can catch up, and which is much better. We know that the naturally acquired immunity as a direct consequence of recovery from disease is much better than the acquired immunity that you're going to get by vaccination. So we can all explain this, but...
That's a great point. We're talking with Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, and this was one that natural immunity is entirely disregarded at any point anymore. And I'm mystified by the differences in regulation country by country, because some countries acknowledge natural immunity. If you want to travel to different parts of Europe, they'll, you can either test negative, you can either show your vaccine pass, or you can prove that you've recovered from it. But other countries don't acknowledge that at all. You have to have the vaccination regardless if you recovered from it, regardless of anything else, no health exceptions, which then, as you were saying, would actually that actually impairs if you've recovered from it naturally, then the vaccine, if I'm understanding correctly, that does a disservice to what what your body has already done naturally. Why is there such inconsistency?
Well, let me tell you, Diana, this has nothing to do anymore with science, unfortunately, because there is much more. There is much more. And that is that natural immunity. So natural immunity, there are two components. The innate immunity, if that doesn't suffice, you still have the naturally acquired immunity. Right. Both of these immune defense mechanisms, and here comes the point, are capable of eliminating the virus. So you may get a virus, but your innate immune system, for example, will eliminate it. You may be shedding the virus for a few days, maybe, but the virus will get eliminated. So this is inducing, in other words, sterilizing immunity. So you hear what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So that is the part that will enable the population to finally acquire a herd immunity. And also, if we are now vaccinating large parts of our population, like the children is our only hope that we will, it's a reservoir to eliminate the virus, and it is an important source for generating herd immunity. If we vaccinate them, per definition, the vaccines cannot prevent transmission, they cannot prevent infection. Per definition, they cannot contribute to herd immunity. We are losing that capacity as well. So what I'm saying here is that by doing this, by vaccinating the children, for example, we are not only doing something which is harmful to their individual health, but it is also harmful to public health, because we can only get rid of the pandemic. This is textbook knowledge. Right. Really, this is, we can only get rid of the pandemic when we get to herd immunity. Because herd immunity will make sure that the vulnerable people, those who have underlying diseases, etc., that the probability that they get infected is so low, that is the definition of herd immunity, that they don't need to be fearful that they're going to be infected, right? Right. So that is so they are automatically protected thanks to the herd immunity of the population. So there is many aspects of this that are completely neglected. And to your point, yes, indeed, the natural immunity, especially the innate immunity, has been completely ignored.
Talking with Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche. Doctor, are we nearing, because of the mildness of Omicron, and apparently it seems like everyone has contracted it over the past couple of weeks, and I read a story coming just earlier today where WHO was saying that it looks like at least half of Europe is probably going to get it within the next 2 months. Are we approaching, or are we near the level of herd immunity now with this?
Well, then there would be, this is our last window of opportunity to get to herd immunity. But my fear is, and from what I'm hearing, it is already coming, that you're now going to continue this mass vaccination with an updated vaccine, which of course will be based on the Omicron. And if we do this, we will lose this last opportunity. Listen, we had an opportunity to achieve herd immunity at the beginning of the pandemic. We messed it up. We started the mass vaccination, and that opportunity was gone. We have now a second opportunity. Why is this? I will explain you. Because the virus, the Omicron, has now become resistant to the vaccinal antibodies. So the vaccinal antibodies can no longer bind to the virus. So because of that, the innate antibodies can now bind again. And that is what's probably also explaining the mildness of the Omicron. And I told you the innate antibodies, etc., innate immunity can eliminate the virus, can contribute to herd immunity. So this is a huge second opportunity that we have. We will pay a price. What is the price that we will pay? Well, the virus has become more infectious. The Omicron is more infectious, obviously, than the original Wuhan strain. And because of that higher level of infectiousness, we will probably have more disease, more cases of disease. Not necessarily. I don't expect severe disease. I don't expect a relative increase in death. But we will have more disease, more mild disease, more moderate disease, etc. But that is not dramatic, as I told you, because people can recover from that. Right. And also, we should not forget, but that is, of course, not my field of expertise. When people start to get more severely ill, we can treat them, for God's sake.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, who you need to go read his Substack And last quick thing for you, we really appreciate what you do. And you bring up a really good point about how this used to be at least the focus on immunity. And then somehow that focus changed to vaccinations, which I'm not anti-vax and neither are you, but you're for responsible and responsible approaches and what is actually going to deliver herd immunity. It can't just be about vaccinations. What delivers that herd immunity? And you've done such a great job explaining that. Of course, we would always love to have you back. We're going to make sure that we share your work far and wide as well. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.